Race in what could really be a contest between two highly unliked people. Hillary Clinton just lost another primary to Bernie Sanders, and headlines scream that Donald Trump has essentially destroyed the Republican Party as we know it. We're going to talk about both of them. I do want to start with Donald Trump today, who is going to be meeting with Paul Ryan. And to see if he can get that kind of mainstream support. And then some of Trump supporters say, well, he doesn't really need Paul Ryan, doesn't really need the Republican establishment. Nolan, as our resident conservative voice, why don't you tell me what you're making of all this?
I think it shines a light on something people have been screaming now for the past year. Donald Trump is not a conservative. And so when you ask a guy like Paul Ryan, who is a principled conservative, the intellectual leader of the party, to put his endorsement behind a guy who, comes out every week and says, last week he said, well, I'll default on the national debt, and yeah, I'm okay raising the minimum wage, and tax reform, entitlement reform, don't bother me with that. I mean, these are not traditional conservative positions in any way, shape, or form, and Donald Trump's not a conservative. So when you have conservative leaders finally facing the reality that, okay, he says he's a Republican, and we've always knee-jerk supported the party's candidate. Now people like Paul Ryan are in a tough position, and they're in a tough position for one reason. They know the reality of today's politics is if they endorse him, every time he says something offensive,
really crazy, yeah, right.
Somebody's going to stick a microphone in front of their faces and say,
"Do you agree? Yeah, are you on board with this?"
You know how that works.
You've got Michigan Republicans jumping into that boat.
You have a few, I think,
overnight.
but
Candace Miller, Mike Bishop.
You've got four of the
week.
congressmen of the congressional Republicans have, but some are sort of reluctant and holding back.
I think Mike Bishop, who faces actual opposition in November in his district from Melissa Gilbert, who's a newcomer to politics and nobody quite knows what to make of her candidacy. I think his alignment with Donald Trump was not a very smart move. I mean, again, it raises that question: how much of what he's saying do you agree with?
For every Republican candidate, and I think that's what Paul Ryan wants to see in his meetings, and the other congressional leaders is: will this guy walk our candidates off the dock in November? And there's a pretty damn good chance he will.
How big of a deal is it that people like Mitt Romney and the entire Bush clan will not endorse him or support him?
And who knows at this point whether that helps him or hurt him, because nothing we've predicted in terms of traditional political thought has applied to Donald Trump so far. I looked at the battleground polls that were out this week from Quinnipiac, a reputable pollster, and they look awfully good for Donald Trump. I would not have thought that. And so who knows what's going to help or hurt him.
What does this do for the state races, the state House and Senate races?
I mean, I think it throws some of them into flux that maybe weren't before. And again, this Mike Bishop race. Mike Bishop comes out and says, I'm supporting Donald Trump. All of a sudden, I think that makes Melissa Gilbert look a lot better to some people in terms of an alternative. There are going to be some other spaces where that happens. I mean, depending on who you talk to, there's either this sort of prediction of doom for the Republican Party in down ticket, that they would lose, for instance, the state House here as a result of Donald Trump's weakness at the top of the poll. But then there's a lot of people who say he's going to surprise you in terms of how well he'll do in terms of the Republican Party. Now, I haven't heard anybody say that they think he can win. I think that demographically, the things he would have to achieve in terms of white male voter turnout, suppressing female and minority voter turnout, it would be unprecedented. Now, it doesn't say it can't happen, but that seems unlikely. I think the question, though, is whether he can get enough Republicans energized to come out to vote for him, to not have this bloodletting.
I don't think it's Republicans that are going to put him over. I think what you've seen in the primary season so far is that he's managed to bring a lot of non-aligned folks into the political process. And if that continues, you don't know what's going to happen, particularly when you look at the other side and the struggles Hillary Clinton is having. She lost.
Thanks for the segue. That's what I was going next.
Okay, well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
She lost West Virginia the other night, and she goes now to Kentucky, which also a coal mining state where they're
open primaries,
and then to Oregon, where all these kids are going to come out for Bernie Sanders, and then to California, where who knows what's going to happen. She could go into the convention with a string of losses. And if you look at the exit polling from West Virginia, there's a whole lot of she's got a whole lot of problem with blue collar workers. and with young voters.
You also have
And if
40%
they-
of the people in that primary say they would vote for Donald Trump.
That's right.
Over her. So I mean, there's something weird going on in those primaries, and again,
20% said
they're
they'd
open.
stay home. And that's what she's got to worry about. If she
Yeah.
can't generate more enthusiasm, at this point, the presumptive nominee, they ought to be rallying behind her, and the party is, and it's not much different than what's happening on the Republican side, except the Republicans are now stuck with their guy.
I mean, what kind of frustration must she be dealing with right now saying, oh, come on?
I mean, again, I think this is the frustration that followed her throughout her political career. This is a really deeply intelligent policy wonk who has always had a hard time relating to the Joe Sixpack voter or whoever you want to sort of conjure as that typical American voter. At the same time, she's had a lot of success with it, and in the end, she tends to win. She had problems trying to become the senator from New York. I mean, it's a very liberal state, but she had Democratic challenges there. I'm not that worried. I don't think there's a question about whether Hillary Clinton beats Donald Trump in November. It's a question of to what degree does she beat him? Does she crush him and crush the party in the?
I think you're going to have a lot of people in both parties staying home.
Well, and my question is how
not-
ugly is this campaign going to be?
Oh, this is going to be
brutal.
You've got a guy who will say anything about anyone, willing to play as dirty, and then you've got the Clintons who have traditionally engaged in some very nasty, ugly character assassinations and dirty politics. So you've got probably two of the nastiest
But here,
politicians
what
on
would
the
character
planet.
assassination of Donald Trump look like? I mean,
What
you
is
don't
it?
have to.
That hasn't
you don't
been-
have to. You don't have to make up anything. You don't have to get
And
in the
yet,
gutter.
nothing seems to have
He just
have
keeps
hurt him.
rolling on, which is amazing. All right, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much, guys. That's going to do it for My Week. Thanks so much for joining us. Check out myweek.org for all the shows you might have missed. Plus, we are on Facebook and we are on Twitter. I'm Christy McDonald. We will see you next time for My Week. Take care.